Okay, let's dive into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the intensely complex case of Dr. Chen Jingyuan. What makes this case just so uniquely compelling is how our source documents completely deconstruct his prosecution. And keep in mind, this whole prosecution was sparked by a single retweet. But the analysis breaks it down across 4 completely distinct academic disciplines. We're going to see how a single legal event gets analyzed from multiple, vastly different angles, giving us this incredible 360-degree view of a massive systemic issue.
So, here's our roadmap for the explainer. First, we'll look at the official indictment. Second, the constitutional defense. Third, the physics of chaos. Fourth, the psychological contrast. And finally, the counter-accusation. Let's get right into it.
Section 1, the official indictment. Analyzing the legal charge. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how we're looking strictly at the legal foundation of the charge itself.
Officially, the charge translates to picking quarrels and provoking trouble, but the source documents point out that the core factual finding in the indictment is, well, incredibly brief and highly vague. It literally just states that between July 2019 and April 2022, Chen used circumvention software to access internet chat tools and scattered false speech disrupting social order. He was specifically charged for retweeting content, which actually included commentary from U.S. embassy posts over that multi-year period.
Now, the analysis points out a really stark contrast here between what strict legal requirements dictate and what the indictment actually contains. Under Article 293, a charge like this requires a specific time, a specific location, and specific content. But the actual indictment? It just offers these vague timeframes and doesn't specify a single actual post. Plus, the law requires quantifiable damage or actual chaos. Yet, the sources note there's zero proof of chaos provided, no causal link whatsoever. And finally, you have to prove intentional falsehood. But the analysis indicates nobody ever actually verified what made the speech false in the first place. It just completely lacks verifiable metrics from the prosecution.
Moving right along to Section 2, the constitutional defense, rights on paper versus practice.
Through this second lens, the defense examines the massive tension between rights as they exist on paper and how they actually play out in reality. They invoke 4 specific rights guaranteed by the Constitution: freedom of speech under Article 35, equality before the law under Article 33, the right to complaint under Article 41, and academic freedom under Article 47. To give you a really concrete example from the sources, Dr. Chen actually wrote a prison blood letter trying to formally complain about his treatment, but prison guards intercepted it and refused to transmit it. The defense argues this directly, physically obstructed his Article 41 right to complaint.
The source documents describe this whole phenomenon as a dual-track system. On one track, the Constitution looks solemn on paper, explicitly guaranteeing human rights and legal equality. But on the other track, the defense argues it gets totally distorted in practice. They point to selective enforcement as the prime example here. Basically, the peripheral retweeter, Chen, gets punished for spreading the info, while the original posters of the exact same content aren't pursued at all. The defense's argument is simply that these constitutional rights are completely failing to translate into judicial reality.
Section 3, the physics of chaos. Avalanche dynamics in court. And this brilliantly illustrates our next point.
This brings us to honestly the most unexpected part of our explainer. The defense literally applies theoretical physics to deconstruct a criminal charge. Let's clear up the academic jargon real quick. They use the concept of self-organized criticality, or SOC, along with avalanche dynamics. This is a theory by physicist Purbach. It basically explains how complex systems can spontaneously reach a critical state. And when a system is in that state, even a tiny perturbation, think of it like a single grain of sand dropping, can trigger a massive, scale-free avalanche. The defense takes this exact mathematical framework and applies it to how information cascades on social media networks.
Let's map this physics terminology right onto the actors in this case. In network science, a peripheral node, or edge, is an actor with extremely low influence. The defense assigns this role to Chen because, well, his account had fewer than 100 followers and totally negligible interaction. It's a long-tail account. On the flip side, the supernode, or hub, is an entity with high systemic influence and massive power. In this mathematical model, the judicial system itself acts as that supernode.
And this brings us to a crucial mathematical variable, M. M represents the branching factor of an information cascade. Basically, how many new shares does a single post generate? Because Chen's account is a peripheral node with practically no reach, his M value is far, far less than 1.
In physics, this means you're in the deep, subcritical zone. The source analysis points out that the mathematical probability of someone in this zone triggering a societal avalanche or severe public disorder, it's practically zero. Scientifically, it's categorized as an impossible event.
But the defense doesn't stop there. They issue a counter-warning based on this exact same science. They argue that it's actually the judicial system, acting as that highly influential supernode that risks driving the entire global system into a supercritical state. By systematically ignoring evidence and applying immense institutional pressure, it's the hub that accumulates all the systemic risk. They argue the system itself is acting as the true disruptive force, one that could eventually trigger a real societal avalanche.
Section 4. The psychological contrast. Maturation versus stagnation.
For our fourth lens, the source material uses developmental psychology to analyze the behaviors of both the defendant and the judicial apparatus. It's a fascinating contrast across 3 developmental stages. Cognitively, the individual, Chen, demonstrates post-formal thought. He shows an ability to handle complex paradoxes and integrate different disciplines. The system, on the other hand, displays rigid linear logic, functioning at a lower, formal operational stage. Morally, Chen operates on universal ethics and internal principles, whereas the system relies heavily on conventional rule-following and strict obedience to authority. And emotionally, the analysis highlights Chen's incredibly high resilience, how he converts his anger into a logical defense. This is sharply contrasted against the system's emotional paralysis and defensive apathy.
The psychological analysis views Chen's actions through what's called an Ericksonian perspective. It concludes that by turning this immense suffering into such a detailed, multidisciplinary historical document, he achieved what psychologists call generativity and post-traumatic growth. Despite facing extreme institutional pressure, his ability to document his experience in this way demonstrates a really profound level of psychological maturity and resilience.
Section 5. The Counter-Accusation. Indicting the system. Let's move to and see how this builds.
This is where the defense essentially turns the criminal code right back against the prosecutors, applying that exact same legal scrutiny to the state. They outline a severe list of criminal codes they accuse judicial officials of violating. We're talking abuse of power under Article 397, bending the law for personal gain under Article 399, extorting confessions by torture under Article 247, and illegal detention under Article 238. The source material details claims of violence, completely unrecorded arrests where family members weren't notified for days, and these staggering moments in the trial where prosecutors allegedly admitted, right on the record, that they didn't verify the core evidence and literally had no intention of doing so.
Building on those specific code violations, the defense takes it a massive step further. They characterize the highly efficient coordination between the police, the prosecutors, and the judges in this case, not as standard legal procedure, but as an evil force organization under the anti-organized crime law. From the defense's perspective, this seamless pipeline, from arrest all the way to conviction, represents a systemic, organized subversion of justice rather than actually upholding it.
So, the crucial point is this. Who actually holds the power to create a true societal avalanche? Is it the isolated individual with fewer than 100 followers just retweeting an article? Or is it a massive, coordinated judicial apparatus that bends procedures and ignores evidence? Based on the multidisciplinary evidence from law, theoretical physics, and psychology that we've just explored together, I really encourage you to think deeply about how systemic power functions in our world. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning what you see.